In the rural mountains of South Korea, dark and ancient creatures lurk, and after one child makes a mistake, they begin to witness horrors beyond their worst nightmare. You're about to hear that story and more in today's episode of Unexplained Encounters. I'm your host, Darkness Prevails. Follow me on X at Dark Prevails for some very terrible opinions all the time. Today I've got a collection of scary and unexplained stories, featuring Korean folklore monsters in the woods, a disturbing urban legend from Barbados come to life, and plenty more. If you want your story narrated on the show, send it to me at darkstories.org. Help us grow to be the biggest horror show on the planet by following and reviewing Unexplained Encounters on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. And look, if you're on YouTube, you better hit the like button, because I know some local demons myself that might pay you a visit. Anyway, don't forget to pre-order my sexy new hardcover book, Creepy Campfire Stories, which releases on July 8th, 2025. It's a haunting collection of allegedly true and outdoorsy horror stories that, if you were to read it around a campfire, all the single wendigos in the woods would be fawning over you. Sexy single wendigos in your area not guaranteed, may cause hallucinations, nightmares, and an unexplainable six-pack. Get it today on Amazon by searching for Creepy Campfire Stories by Darkness Prevails, or just click the link in the description. Now then, let's begin. The Still Donkey, from Rofra. My story comes from a little island not far from America, called Barbados. Most are familiar with it. And no, it's not in Jamaica, as some would think. It's a little island in the Caribbean Sea, a great place for tourists to come and enjoy the beaches and wonderful people. It's not normally known for many paranormal occurrences, though it has its few folk tales, which brings me to speak about this one story I'm sharing with you. I was around, let's say 8, if I remember right, when it all started. I was very young. Most of my life during that time was rather foggy, but there were moments that never left my memory, good and bad. Though this experience was one that always stays in my head rent-free. This was the age when I was given my own bedroom. I used to sleep with my 2 older sisters, but then my parents said I was becoming a big boy now and needed my own room. So they cleaned out an old storage room in the house and turned it into a room for me. I was very excited, because I would be able to have a big room to play in. Though it wasn't that big. I realized that when I got older. But back then, it was a big enough space to wow my little mind. I was ecstatic. Though as exciting as it was, I was still young, and the dark was something that I feared very much. So, occasionally, I'd either have my biggest sister stay with me until I fell asleep, or my mother, saying I would hear noises outside my window or I would see shadows. Which would be true. As a kid, our imaginations would run wild, seeing and hearing things, so they understood. After a year of finally getting used to my bedroom, I was now fully adjusted to it, and never really needed anyone to tuck me in. Though there was something that would still bother me about that room. The window. It had one window that faced the neighbor's house, which was like 10 feet away from our house. I even remember there was a kid who would visit his grandparents at that house. He used to talk to me through the window. That's how close it was. Though, odd part was, I used to hear something like chains occasionally on nights by that window, which was odd due to me not remembering seeing anything at all in the neighbor's side of the house where the window was. But I would hear them, like it was right below my window. Though I was too scared to ever take a look, keeping the curtain closed and window locked, I would mention it to my mom, and she would laugh, saying, "Oh, you're just hearing the steel donkey on the nights, dragging its chains on the roads at night, ready to drag away naughty kids." Now, I think that was her way of trying to keep me out of trouble. But it was terrifying to think that it was some kind of monster donkey outside my window wanting to drag me away. All I could do was believe her and keep that darn window shut. Then one night, something happened. It was a night where I stayed up late, watching late-night shows on Cartoon Network. I think I was watching an episode of Teen Titans. Not the watered-down version they play nowadays constantly. The real Teen Titans. The one that doesn't have "go" at the end and was well animated at the time. My mom and dad were out with my sisters in their rooms, doing girl things. I wasn't sure what that was, but all I knew was they weren't bothering me and my cartoons, so I was happy. While I was watching my cartoons, though, I heard them. The chains dragging along below the window again. Though it wasn't near me at first. It sounded like it was near the back side of the house where my room was. Now I was terrified, because they were only heard when I was in my room, where I definitely wasn't at this moment. I was sitting in the living room with the TV on, hearing those god-awful chains. So I tried to ignore it. I turned up the volume on the TV to see if ignoring it might make the noises stop. Though as I thought they were gone, I heard them again, this time at the window by my door, which was inches away from the living room. They moved? How did they move? They don't normally go anywhere else but my bedroom window. These thoughts ran in my head as I was frozen in fear to the sound of those cold-sounding chains dragging on my patio floor inches away from my door. Then I heard it. The sound of what I could assume were hooves clomping at the base of my door, just stopping shy of the door just before I heard a loud thud, like it was jamming its hoof into the door. I yelled out in fear with the sudden sound, and my sisters immediately ran out of their room, calling my name, asking what was wrong, with the only thing I could muster up being, "It's at the door. It wants me." My sisters, when telling me this story from their point of view, they say I was shivering like a leaf, and I kept pointing at the door, saying that it wants me. They, wondering what was wrong, pulled open the curtain by the door window and looked out at the patio. And they didn't see anything. They told me it was getting late and that I should be in bed. They tried to tuck me in, but I couldn't go to sleep, not after what just happened. So I forced my eldest sister to stay with me until I did sleep, 9-year-old me asking my 17-year-old sister to stay. That sister in particular loved me. She was the sibling I had the closest bond with. She stayed, and I was able to get some sleep, even after a night like that. When that sister turned 18, she met a guy who ended up wanting to marry her down the line. She was in love with him, and knew him for a while. Before long, they got married, and she moved away. That left me, my other sister, and my parents. The relationship between me and my second eldest sister isn't the best. It was absolutely horrible back then, as I felt she kind of hated me. So if I ever needed any moral support, I would always look up to my oldest sister, with my parents always busy and my dad going to prison a few years back. She would be my rock. But with her gone, I didn't have that anymore. I was basically on my own with anything that I might need help with my mother trying to be some help occasionally when her job allowed it. It was then that it happened again. This time, it was more terrifying than ever. I was in the middle of a dream, standing in a forest where I was walking, not really sure where I was heading to, just walking. Suddenly, I heard someone say something behind me. I couldn't understand or grasp what it was at first, but it was getting louder. The sound was getting more verbal and coherent, with the occasional "up" being heard. I tried to focus on what it was saying, and why. Then I finally heard it loudly, like if someone was right by my ear. "Wake up." Then, just like that, I woke up. Though when I did, I felt as if something was very wrong. I didn't even get a chance to grasp where I was or what time it was. All I knew was something was wrong. I had been sleeping on my side, back against my bedroom window where my bed laid. In that brief moment of thinking, I realized it was in the daytime with the light beaming through the window behind me. But it was quiet, like the sound of life outside my window and inside was removed, with the only thing I could hear being my pounding heart. Soon I saw it, in the corner of my eye, a shadow hovering just in the edge of my peripheral. It was there, just waiting for me. I froze, not like I was scared. I was terrified, yes, but that's not why I couldn't move. I felt like my mind knew what my first instinct was, which would be to turn around, and it refused to allow it, stopping me from seeing what was waiting for me. In my head, I needed to know, but in my heart, I knew that was stupid. I was a kid after all, and I knew it would be a mistake to look. Even so, I willed myself to turn my body to look behind me. It was slow and difficult, but when I finally managed it, all I could see was a dark shadow just behind the curtain of my window hovering over me. Then it immediately jolts forward, making a deep, bone-chilling snarl that made me scream out in horror. My mom ran into the room as I began to panic, hyperventilating and crying. She held me, rocking me back and forth to calm me down, until I was finally able to explain what happened. With it no longer there for her to see, I tried my best to explain it to her. My mother is rather superstitious, believing in the paranormal. So when I told her what happened and the stuff that had happened to me before, she had the idea to contact a priest. Eventually, a priest did come. He said our house was tainted by an entity, that it was fueled by the negativity that the household had produced, with my second eldest sister and I always fighting, my dad's prison issues, and my sister leaving, and my mom being upset about the whole thing. He said he would purge the negativity to help us start with a new leaf. He burned sage around the house and prayed around the house for the whole night, and then he left. We believed it was gone, as that night it did feel lighter. The house wasn't as hot as before, and the air felt so much less heavy. However, that was momentary. The next day, my sister and I got into a fight about something. I was sent into my room by my mom. I ran to my room, shut the door, and dropped into my bed, yelling into my pillow. Right after that, I heard a loud bang in the room. My head shot up to see what it was. I looked over at my fan, which was on the other side of the room, but was now on the floor, shacked out with all the blades inside broken. I stared at it in awe and disbelief, which was cut short when my mom came storming in, yelling at me, asking if I threw the fan because she sent me to my room. I told her no, that it wasn't me, but she didn't believe me. I was then grounded for a week. I had to sleep in my room with no fan, which was miserable due to me sweating during my sleep. During this time, I was forced to open my window while sleeping. One night, after going to bed, I was shortly awoken by the sound of chains again. This time around, my bed was moved away from the window due to the last incident, so the window was at the foot of my bed, not to the side of it. I woke up to the sound of these chains, but they weren't outside my window. Disturbingly enough, they were next to my bed. I was about to get up to go shut the window, but then I saw it. My door wide open, and standing there was a tall figure staring at me. Now, it was dark at the time. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes on me. I dared not move. I felt like if I did, it would have attacked me. However, I did do something stupid. I spoke to it. "Dad?" I asked, knowing it couldn't be him. He still wasn't home yet. The figure said nothing. It just stared at me, with the sound of chains hanging from its body as it looked. "Mom?" I asked, wondering if my mother was watching me sleep to see if I was okay. But there was no response. The figure stood there, quiet as it watched me. So all I did was close my eyes as tightly as I possibly could and tried to sleep. It was difficult, but I had to do it. I felt as though if I got out of bed, it would have done something to me. So I lay there for what felt like hours, eyes closed, eyes on me, before I felt myself drifting back to sleep, finally, either by exhaustion or my body wanting me to pass this horrible moment. But just before drifting off, I heard this very deep and gargling voice say, "Sweet dreams." Since that night, I've never had any more incidents with this thing. Later, I looked up the story of the steel donkey my mother referenced. From what I read, it was about a donkey that had chains it used to drag around the slaves of the old plantations, back in the day when Barbados was first colonized. The story said the donkey would drag the souls of the slaves that died on its chains when it was still alive, dragging them around to look for more souls to add to its chain links. People say that the slaves that are attached to it are seen just after you hear the chains of the donkey dragging around outside your home. People are warned that you should not open your windows when you hear the chains to keep the spirits from entering your home. I'm 23 now. I still live in that house with my parents. We don't get experiences like that anymore, but my God, was that a memory that will never leave me till this day. These days I look back on it and say, wow, that was my first experience with the unexplained. Even if it was a case of periodical night terrors or something real, it quite literally scared me crapless. Warning: the following story contains depictions of violence against animals. My memories from Korea. From Darbus. People ask why I never joined the hiking trips here in America. Why I make excuses when friends invite me to their cabins in the woods. I'll tell them I'm busy, that I have exams to study for. But the truth is more complicated than that. Creepier than that. When I was 12 years old, during winter break of my first year in middle school, my parents sent me to stay with my grandparents in their mountain village. Gosung is a small place in Gangwon province, near the eastern mountains. The village was dying even then. Most young people had left for cities, leaving only the elderly. My grandmother had been sick, and my parents thought I could help my grandfather around the house for a couple of weeks. I'd only ever visited there once before, when I was too young to remember it clearly. The village was nothing like Seoul, just 20 or so houses scattered along a narrow road that wound up the mountainside. No PC rooms, no convenience stores, not even reliable cell service. Just mountains and forest and silence. My grandfather's house was traditional. It had wooden floors and sliding paper doors, and a courtyard with persimmon trees. At night it would be absolutely dark, in a way that city people can't understand unless they experience it themselves. Without streetlights or neon signs, there's just the moon and stars when the sky was clear. After I arrived, I helped my grandfather with chores, listened to my grandmother's stories, and explored the local village. And that's when I first heard about the dokebi. In Western stories, goblins are small mischievous creatures. Our dokebi are different. They're powerful spirits that can bring fortune or terrible misfortune. The villagers had maintained a small shrine at the edge of the forest for generations. Grandfather showed it to me. A simple stone structure with offerings of rice cakes and soju. He told me it was to keep the mountain dokebi content, so they would bless the village instead of cursing it. I laughed when he said this. Soul kids don't believe in such things. We study science and English and mathematics. We didn't put much weight into superstitions. Grandfather didn't scold me for laughing, but his face was serious. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "The old ways may seem foolish to you, but some things remain true, whether you believe in them or not." I should have listened to him. 3 days later, I was bored and restless. My grandfather was gone, helping a neighbor repair their roof, and my grandmother was sleeping. I decided to explore the mountain path behind our house. I took some snacks and water and set off, planning to be back before dinner. The path was well worn at first, climbing gently through pine forest. After about a kilometer, I came to the shrine my grandfather had shown me. The offerings had been replaced recently. There were fresh rice cakes and a small cup of soju. I'm not proud of what I did next. It was childish, very disrespectful. I picked up one of the rice cakes and took a bite of it. It was sweet and sticky. Then I drank some of the soju, grimacing at the unfamiliar burn. I'd never tasted alcohol before. As a final gesture of disrespect, I knocked over the stone altar, watching the carefully arranged offerings scattering on the ground. Keep in mind, I was a pubescent kid, a little boy with a bit of rage, feeling like I'd been abandoned here to help my grandparents. I said out loud, "Stupid superstition," and laughed at how dramatic I was being. As if in direct response, the wind suddenly picked up, howling through the trees, and the temperature, I swear, it dropped several degrees in an instant. Spooked despite myself, I hurried back down the path toward the village. That night brought the first encounter. I woke around 2 a.m. to a strange noise outside. A rhythmic tapping like someone gently knocking on every window of the house in sequence. A tap, tap, tap at the kitchen window. Then silence. A tap, tap, tap at the living room window. Then silence. When the tapping reached my room, I pulled the blanket over my head, telling myself it was just tree branches in the wind. The tapping stopped directly outside my window, replaced by a sound like wet breathing. Then a voice, neither male nor female, somehow both whispering and loud at the same time.
"I accept your offering, child. Now I will give you something in return."
I didn't move, didn't breathe, until morning came and the sun filled my room. I convinced myself then it had been a dream. The soju I drank, playing tricks on my mind. I didn't tell my grandparents about any of it. The second encounter came 2 days later. My grandfather kept rabbits in these hutches behind the house. 6 of them total, white and brown with soft fur and twitching noses. I enjoyed feeding them each morning, watching them hop around their enclosure. That morning I went out to find the hutches open and empty. At first I thought the rabbits had simply escaped, but I found what remained of them. They'd been arranged in a circle in the center of the courtyard, bodies splayed open from throat to tail. Their innards had been removed and arranged in patterns around them. Intestines coiled into spiral shapes, livers and hearts placed in specific positions. It was like a grotesque art installation. What disturbed me most was the precision of it. No splattered blood or signs of a struggle. Each cut was so clean and precise. My grandfather found me standing there staring. He pulled me away, his face pale. He said nothing as he cleaned up the scene, burying the remains in the woods. That evening, he went to the shrine with new offerings, higher quality rice cakes, more expensive soju, and something wrapped in red cloth that he would not let me see. "What did you do at the shrine?" he asked me that night. Feeling guilty and scared, I confessed to everything. I expected anger, but instead grandfather looked afraid. "The Dokebi has noticed you," he said. "We must be respectful until you go." I believed him this time. For 3 days, nothing happened. I began to relax, thinking that whatever killed the rabbits, which must have been a fox or wild dog, not some mythical goblin, had moved on. My parents called to say they would pick me up in 2 days, and I was eager to return to the normality of Seoul. The third and final encounter came on my last night in the village. I was packing my bag when the electricity went out. This wasn't unusual in the village. Winter storms here would often knock out the power. My grandfather lit oil lamps. My grandmother went to bed early, while my grandfather and I played Watu card games by lamplight. Around 10 p.m., he yawned and told me he was going to bed. He said, "Don't stay up too late. Your parents will be here early." I promised I wouldn't, but I wasn't as tired as him. After he left, I continued playing solitaire with the cards, enjoying the quiet. Suddenly, there was a thud on the roof, like someone walking with a limp. A thud and then a dragging sound, going from one end of the house to the other, then back again. I let myself believe it was snow falling from the tree branches, maybe a raccoon dog. Anything but what I feared it might be. The walking stopped directly above me. Then came a scraping noise, like someone trying to dig through the roof tiles. I blew out the lamp and sat there in the dark, barely able to breathe. After a minute of silence, I began to think it was over, until I heard a voice coming from directly behind me.
"Why did you extinguish the light? Don't you want to see my face?"
I screamed and leapt away, spinning around. In the dark, I could just make out a figure standing where no one had been moments before. It was tall, taller than any man, and with proportions that didn't match any man either. I backed toward the door, fumbling behind me for the handle. The figure took a step forward into a patch of moonlight coming through the window. What I saw will never leave me. Its skin was the deep red of congealed blood, wrinkled like an old person's, but stretched tight over an inhuman skull. A single horn protruded from its head, not like a rhinoceros, but more like a twisted branch of black wood. Its mouth was wide, splitting its face nearly ear to ear, filled with teeth that resembled broken pieces of pottery. And its eyes were entirely black, reflecting the moonlight. In one hand, it held what looked like a club or a hammer, but the shape of it seemed to shift when I tried to focus on it. I remember what it said next.
"You took from me. Now I will take from you."
It reached for me with its free hand, with too many fingers, all too long. I don't remember opening the door. I don't remember running into the forest in my socks, with no coat despite the winter cold. I remember only fragments, my lungs burning, falling multiple times. Somehow I found myself at the village shrine, collapsed before the stone altar I desecrated days earlier. I was crying and praying, promising anything, if only the thing would leave me alone. I felt a hand on my shoulder and screamed again, but it was only my grandfather. He had followed my tracks in the snow. His face was grim, and he helped me up. "Did it touch you?" he asked. In sobs, I shook my head. "Then you can still leave." He would not let me return to their house. we walked over to the neighbor's house instead. I spent the night huddled under blankets, jumping at every noise. My grandfather returned to our house alone to pack my things. When my parents arrived the next morning, I was frantic to leave. My grandfather spoke to them privately while I waited in the car. As I sat there, I stared at the tree line, waiting for any sign of movement. I never told my parents the full story, thinking they would call it a child's nightmare or homesickness. I never went back to that village. My grandparents passed away years ago. The house sold off to strangers. I've dreamt of that night, of the dokebi and its twisted smile, but in my dreams I never get away. So you ask me why I don't go hiking, why forests make me nervous. Well, now you know. Some things follow you, not in body perhaps, but in your memory. And memories can be the most terrifying monsters of all. UFOs and Voices in the Night. From Godzilla 248. I'm 16 years old, and I live in a town that's about 30 to 35 minutes east of St. Louis, Missouri. This is a town of about 30,000 to 40,000 people, and we're fairly close to Scott AFB. So I wonder why I never see anything even remotely strange, with one exception, which I've put at the end of this story. I live in a 3-story house, but only 2 stories are visible in the front yard. My yard slopes down on the sides. It's about 5:25, but it's winter, so it's already dark out. I'm bringing our trash cans inside the garage. These are big green trash cans, and I look up and see this bright yellowish white light that appeared to be moving rather slowly across the sky. This object appeared to be thousands of feet away, possibly hundreds of feet in the air, so this thing must have been pretty bright. Suddenly it starts to accelerate and grow brighter and go behind the clouds. A storm was rolling in at the time. Now, I've observed planes flying by from roughly the same distance away from me before, and this appeared to fly much faster and quieter than that. In addition, the planes are quite loud. This means I'm quite familiar with the KC-10 and KC-135 tanker planes, the civilian airliners landing at Mid-America Airport, and the occasional F-15 and F-18. This object, as it flies, its brightness and speed rises and falls. Then suddenly it disappears behind a cloud. As I move to finish pulling in the trash cans, I see it again. When I first saw the object, I was facing south, and when I see it again, I'm facing east. Mind you, it appeared to be traveling in a rough circle from my position, so it either traveled over my head as I was in the garage when I took my eyes off of it, flipped around and traveled approximately 140 degrees, or it kept going straight and traveled roughly 220 degrees. I resumed observing it for about half a minute, at which point I look away and it's gone. So I finish pulling the cans into the garage and I walk back out. The object was back again, in the position I first saw it, beginning to traverse the same path as before. However, it disappeared into a big cloud again, this time for good. This was not an airplane. It wasn't a satellite. The sky is nowhere near dark enough to see a satellite with the naked eye, due to the large amount of light pollution in the area. It definitely wasn't a star. We can't see many stars in my area. And it wasn't the moon, which was overhead during this event. Story number 2. Did you call me, Dad? This was a couple years back. I don't remember the date or time of the event, but I can assure you it was sometime before the COVID pandemic. I was asleep, or sort of. I don't really remember. Perhaps I was trying to fall back to sleep. Anyway, I'm just lying in my bed. Then all of a sudden, I hear someone call my name, and the voice sounds exactly like my dad. No weird warping of the voice like you would typically hear in some of these stories. Just clear, as if he's standing nearby. But that's the thing. No one was in my room. My door was closed, and I can't even tell where exactly the voice was coming from. At the time, I had a bunk bed. It was tall enough to have me higher off the ground than everything below my dad's shoulders, and he was about 6'2". I climbed down from the top bunk and walk up to the door, open it, and walk into the hallway, which is basically a balcony overlooking our 2-story living room that connects to the rest of the upstairs. "Dad? Did you call me?" I asked. No response. "Dad?" I asked again. Still no reply. I decided to go back to bed. I fell asleep soon after that and never heard anything like it again. I have no clue what happened. Weird House. From Eli C. I've always been a connoisseur of the unexplained. I thought it was entertaining, but I've always been on edge of whether or not I actually believe in it. My view was changed when I stepped into this old house by a road in southern Minnesota. I'll give you some backstory. I was raised in the small town of Red Wing, Minnesota, and I always went with my dad to go camping, hiking, and exploring the forests around my town. When I was 17 years old, I was driving home after working at a local slaughterhouse on the outskirts of town. I just happened to turn my head to the left, and I saw something large pointing out of the trees about a few kilometers away. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found a small clearing on the side of the road where I could park my vehicle. Once I got out of my car, I then walked and climbed over the guardrails. Then I slowly clambered down the hilly path down to this big house. It's hard to describe this house. It sort of looks like Count Olaf's house from the TV show, A Series of Unfortunate Events. If you've ever lived out in the country, you might see some run-down houses with decaying cars outside. Imagine that, but tenfold. This house was on another level. There were broken down and rusted cars with wheels and windshields gone. It looked to be very abandoned. I looked around for an entrance to the place, and eventually I found one. An old wooden door with the wood peeling off of it. I was lucky enough for the door to open with just some pushing. When I walked inside the house, there was something that I found disturbing. Upside-down crosses on every wall of this particular room. With and without Jesus, all shapes, colors, and sizes. I was still curious and wanted to see more. With a smartphone flashlight and a dream, I dredged through the house. The floor was very dirty with garbage, and old tins of food were strewn about. Suddenly I heard voices, like faint conversations happening around me, and around the same time there were hard footsteps just on the floor above. Dust began to fall from the ceiling as the footsteps vibrated. The voices grew louder. I swear it sounded like an ancient language, something that I couldn't make out. I kept going with my flashlight. Eventually I made it to what I think was the kitchen, but it was weird. It had no oven. All I saw was a sink and some drawers with silverware and dishes. I was slightly terrified by them. I decided to go to the second floor to investigate whatever that thumping on the floorboards was. When walking on the creaky stairs, I was scared that I would wake up whatever was up there and get its attention. I made it to the second floor, and I opened the door to the first room I saw. The second I did, this overpowering stench filled the entire floor. I've smelled rotten animals from working at slaughterhouses, but this was worse than any other pig that has ever died and been forgotten about. I popped my head into the smelly room and saw something in the decaying bed. Something moving, squirming, and beginning to scream. Its eyes showed out from the covers. Golden brown eyes that looked like they'd seen everything. It slowly stood up with covers drifting off its body. The misshapen monster-type thing I can't even describe what this thing even was, or if I should have even told anyone. But it was rising. I then heard the voices again, rushing at me tenfold in that strange language. I'd woke up something bad, something evil. The thing screamed at me again. That was my ticket to leave. I'm a 6'4" guy, 210 pounds. I'm no Olympic runner, but I booked it out of there. The thing just stood there, laughing. I ran down the stairs and saw the kitchen, and that room full of crosses. I then heard feet running full force right behind me. But I didn't look back. I got in my car, drove away, and made it safely home back to my apartment. I learned a cold lesson that day. Never explore abandoned places in the middle of nowhere. Shadow people or demons, from As Seen in Your Dreams. This took place my sophomore year of college in 2021. Admittedly, this was a rough time for me. I'd been cheated on and dumped. COVID had hit. But the silver lining was my college had opened back up, allowing students to return to campus and proceed with hybrid classes. This was better than sitting around at home, so back I went. During this year, I had somewhat veered off my path. I was drinking with friends at house parties weekly, even on school nights, not really sleeping and not focusing on my schoolwork. This wasn't really my style, but like I said, it was a low time for me. However, when I did sleep, I began to have these dreams. It was always of a lurking, dark, shadowy presence that I couldn't really make out, but I knew it was there. It made me feel real fear, gut fear, even when I was asleep. In one of my dreams, the most vivid one, this dark shadow went inside me, in my mouth, like you might see in a movie. It wanted to take me over, and in that dream, I could feel it crawling around under my skin. I woke up sweating with small bruises on my upper arm. In another dream, I remember shouting Christo at the presence as it got closer, which is Christ in Latin. This was my attempt to ward off the dark entity. I think that's something I picked up from the show Supernatural, because I never did learn Latin personally. It got to the point where I started to tell friends about these dreams. They laughed it off a bit. I mean, I would too, but some suggested that I should see a priest. I'm Jewish, but this thought really started to appeal to me. I actually asked to join my friend when she went to Easter Mass. It was my first time going to church. I even got sprinkled with holy water. I expected my skin to sizzle or burn, but it didn't. One night after that, I was alone in my room sitting at my desk. My dorm was set up more like an apartment. I had a room to myself while my other roommates were located down the hall, each with their own rooms. My bedroom door was directly behind me, left open a crack. Only one other of my roommates was home and in her room at the time. As I sat doing my homework, I felt a presence behind me. It was palpable, making my ears perk up. I listened for a sound, but nothing came. So I turned around, and nothing was there. I brushed it off, but a moment later I received a text from my roommate, who was also home, asking if I had just walked by her room all the way down the hall. My heart was beating out of my chest. I jumped up and ran to her room to ask what she saw. She told me her door was also left open, and she saw a shadow walk by in the direction of my room. Getting that confirmation from someone else was a little too real for me. After that, activity picked up a lot. I would notice dark shadows in my peripheral, or in the corner of the room in our apartment. I would find myself looking in the direction of the shadows, or do a double take of what I thought I saw. My roommates would notice it too, but no one else had reoccurring demon dreams. Our dorm was in a relatively new building. I didn't think it was haunted. Looking back, I think I was in such a dark place in my life that I may have attracted some dark energy. Things in my life improved. I started to date someone new. The school year came to an end, and I moved off campus. After that, I stopped having demon dreams and stopped seeing shadow figures. Maybe it's not the craziest story, but it felt like a lot was at play beyond what the eye can see. I've never experienced anything like it before. Let me know what you all think. The Birthday Ghost, from Ryan K. The year I turned 4, I moved to this house, a nice house. I still live there after all these years. I have a neighbor to the side and below me. It's always been eerie, but a nice place to live. Until 2020. There's this shadow figure about 6'1", and it comes to play at night every time it's anyone in my family's birthday. It crawls and dwells on and under the stairs, lurking for some poor victim who steps on it. It doesn't like the light of day, and or the light switch. Not some measly phone light, unfortunately. Though it has come close, it has never actually harmed anyone before. The worst happens during my mom and dad's birthdays, because they're consecutive, just 2 days apart really, and it stays longer and haunts us. No one knows about it but my sister and I. We once spotted this tall, lengthy figure in my room, and swore to God not to sleep in my room on our birthdays. The only explanation that it was in my room is that my room is right next to the stairs that it likes so much. Sometimes, when it's just me and my sister, home alone, we see a shadow figure on our balcony at night. It'll make my sister cry, and I'll slam the door shut and lock it. I've noticed that in our basement, things may move ever so slightly. The figure tries to lunge at us, but it always disappears, leaving my sister and I almost half dead from fright. Whatever it is, I hope that when I or my sister finally moves out, it doesn't follow. It's always in the shadows, and I think it just prefers targeting us kids. I swear it's been right next to my parents and they just didn't see it. Couldn't see it. Another strange aspect to this whole ordeal is during mine or my sister's birthdays, I always have these nightmares, and in each one of them, someone in my family gets killed. At the end of one of these dreams, I experienced being slashed by the thing. When I woke up, I found claw marks on my leg. Shallow, but painful. On the other hand, my sister makes a room out of blankets and pillows to make a type of fort for a shelter whenever these nights come around. But I don't think it really does anything for protection. However, it's still cozy and peaceful. It helps her feel less scared. And it seems like when you are scared already, the figure becomes more active. Fortunately, the figure seems to be scared away by prayer. If you ever feel like you're being watched, like someone is there, never simply tell yourself it's probably your imagination. Because if you do, you might be in trouble. You may just have a figure like ours lurking in your home. Aurora, from Paranormal Experience. About 2 years ago, my maternal grandmother passed away 2 days before Christmas Eve in 2021. We celebrated Christmas in a sorrowful atmosphere with our closest relatives. She was basically a second mother to me and my cousins. We spent so much time at her house growing up, even well into our teenage years. Her home was our safe place, the spot where we laughed and argued and created some of the best memories of our lives. She wasn't just a grandmother. She was the grandmother, the glue that held us all together. Losing her didn't just feel like losing a family member. It felt like losing a part of who we were. Losing her brought us closer as relatives, but still, everything was not as it used to be. She was also one of the most caring and loyal people I've ever known. She always put her grandchildren first, making sure we felt loved and safe no matter what. Even in the hospital, in her final days, she said that her grandchildren were the best things that had ever happened to her, that we were her greatest joy. She cared for us more deeply than anything else in her life. Hearing that at her funeral shattered me. I lost it completely. I'd already been struggling with grief, but in that moment, it was like the weight of her love and her absence hit me all at once. She was gone. Nothing would ever be the same. The grief was overwhelming, and I hadn't even moved past the shock phase because it felt so unreal. Like she just vanished, leaving behind an emptiness that no holiday lights or comforting words could fill. A month later, on a dark January night, I was getting ready for bed as usual. The house was silent, filled with that kind of heavy stillness that comes after a loss. Nothing felt weird. I lay down with my face turned toward my nightstand and fell asleep around midnight. I didn't dream, or at least I didn't remember dreaming. All I know is that at 3:20 a.m., something stirred me awake. It wasn't a noise or a sudden movement, just an eerie, unshakable feeling that I was not alone. As my eyes fluttered open, my heart nearly stopped. Right next to my nightstand, barely 20 centimeters from my face, floated the body and face of a woman. She was hovering silently, watching me. The air felt thick, like the whole room was holding its breath. I stared at her, my mouth open in shock. My body refused to move. My first thought was I had sleep paralysis. I had heard of people hallucinating strange figures during these episodes, but this felt too real. The details of her face, the way she seemed solid. It wasn't like a fleeting shadow in the dark. This was something else. Finally, I managed to sit up, rubbing my eyes, trying to force the illusion away. I even slapped myself, hard enough to sting. But nothing changed. She was still there, staring at me with a soft and knowing smile. And then the realization hit me like a punch to the chest. My God, that's my grandmother from my father's side. She's still alive. Panic surged through me. I lost my breath, and before I could stop myself, I blurted out, "What the heck is happening?" The figure just kept smiling, calm and unshaken. She had my grandmother's face, her hair, her warm eyes, the same ones that had looked at me countless times with love. But something was off. Her legs were missing, her body fading into nothing below the waist, like she had been cut off from reality itself. She didn't feel threatening, but there was something deeply unsettling about it. A ghostly version of my living grandmother was standing in my room, reaching across from some unseen boundary to visit me. Why? Why now? Despite my fear, I felt an overwhelming curiosity, a force I could not resist. Slowly, I reached out my hand toward the figure, and to my utter shock, she reached back. Her fingers wrapped around mine, firm but icy cold, like touching something that wasn't meant to exist in this world. She smiled at me then, her eyes closing as if in peace. For what felt like minutes, we just stayed there, frozen in that impossible moment. Then, without a sound, she began to drift backward. Slowly, she glided toward my closed bedroom door, fading as she moved. And, just like that, she was gone. I sat in my bed, gripping the sheets, my pulse hammering in my ears. Sleep was impossible for me after that. I lay awake for several hours, staring at the ceiling, shaken up and confused. I've thought about that night endlessly. I know my grandmother from my father's side is a spiritual person, but even so, why did she appear to me in such a strange, almost ghostly way? Why so soon after my other grandmother's death? And how? Part of me wonders if it was some kind of message, something beyond my understanding. Another part of me is terrified to know that answer. Do you believe in ghosts? Do you think they're spirits of the dead, demons, or something else? Tell me what you believe in the comments. Personally, I'm partial to the echoes of the past idea myself, but I'd love to know what you think. Good night. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Unexplained Encounters. I'm your host, Darkness Prevails. Follow me on Twitter at Dark Prevails, where I commissioned a cute little comic of my persona doing something dumb. If you want your story narrated on a future episode, send it to me at darkstories.org. Help me get our show to be the most popular horror show on the planet by following and reviewing on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Thank you. And lastly, be sure to pre-order my upcoming new book, Creepy Campfire Stories, on Amazon or via the link in the description. It's this sexy hardcover collection of scary outdoorsy stories, and some say if you read it to your friends around the campfire, they'll never be the same. So be warned. Until next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.